Well, hello there, people. I just watched some videos, and a lot of people talk about that I've been using Linux for 3 years, 2 years, and all of these amazing things. And I'm like, I actually think, now I'm thinking about it, I started using Linux actually at this time here. It was like when we had summer break in school. I think, I can't remember, it's so many years ago, but I think it was like in 1997 or 6, I can't remember. But let's just for the sake of argument say it was 97. That gives me an anniversary that's 28 years old. Linux apparently turned 30 years old in 25th of August 2021. Yeah, I've been using Linux for a long time. Like a long time. And it kind of gave me like this idea that to solidate my opinion on the journey and my view on Linux today. And I'm going to say it right out of the bat. A lot of you guys are not going to like what I'm going to say. But stay with that. If you want to know what I'm going to say that you won't like, follow the channel, ring the link button, go onto my Discord, recommend me anything you want me to make videos about. I have like a video suggestion box in there, and 9 out of 10 times I tend to do it. I used to only use that for reaction videos, but I'm kind of getting tired of that. It's just, well, I should start doing it again. It's fun, but I just need a break from it. But anyway, do that. Watch the whole video before you comment down below, because 9 out of 10 times again, will address the questions that you have or clarify something that you think you understand about the video. Like, you don't judge a book just by looking at the cover. You don't rate a meal by just eating half of a potato or french fry or one bite of the steak and leave all the rest there. You know, you don't judge a 5-course meal by the first course. That's it. When you've done that, comment and then either like or dislike whatever you want. But good old Linux here, like the Linux anniversary kind of thing, kind of got me thinking. Let's find some images. Let's see if they have some images here we can look at. We do here. So look a little bit like that. It's just because I don't want you guys to look at my ugly face in full fucking 1080p or whatever, 1440p, because I'm ugly as fuck and I will probably give you fucking scars for life. So look at that side over there, or just listen to what I'm saying and think of it a little bit like a podcast kind of thing. I started helping people with computers about 11, 12 years old. I, at the age of 13, had more computers in my room than anything else. I, at one point, on this is like on average, had like 7 computers in the 90s. I had hardware for thousands of dollars, I didn't even know that. And I would give it away, because the way I got hardware is someone had a problem with a computer. My stepdad knew that I could computing, or could at least figure it out by my own by just thinking. A lot of computing is just common sense. So he would like pimp me out to friends, family, co-workers and stuff like that. And then we will get a really good meal. He will get money. I found out later on I didn't get money, but if it was like a hardware replacement, I would get the old hardware. So I had motherboards, CPUs, floppy drives, all cases. I had like, if I had to take components from an old computer and put them into a new one, I would get like what was reminiscence of the old computer. That was my payment. And then I will sell that for like a tenth of what it was worth, because we didn't have eBay, we didn't have, widely available for Google and all that shit, because it was not invented back then. I don't even think eBay was invented back then, but Google I think was not. So I couldn't just go and say, what is the price for this? So I just like, what did I feel like? You could get a hardware that cost, let's say, $200, and I would sell it for like $50 or $20, because that was just, I need $20 just for some, candy. Or I want to buy something and it costs $20 and you need this thing, I need $20, you don't give me $20 and you get this thing. Like today when I think about it, I could have made a lot of fucking money as a teenager. Way more than cutting grass and standing and putting shit on a shelf like a lot of teenagers do. But yeah, I had a lot of stuff in there. So I started to do almost anything you would go to like a computer store to get fixed. So virus removal, optimization, installing, hardware changes, all of that I started doing about 11, 12 years old. At some point it was so bad that almost every weekend I had some work to do for this, my stepdad. He was a cool guy. He was amazing. He's one of the best stepdad I ever had. He did take advantage of it though. Like he did like, I did get some money once in a while, but I didn't care about it. For me, it was just, I liked doing it. And he enabled me and he allowed me to do it. So you can basically thank him for what I'm doing today to some degree. He just, utilize it a little bit more than I do. And I honestly, I don't care. To this day, I'm not angry or anything like that, so don't take it the wrong way. But yeah, that was when I started, and then I became, like the neighborhood Spider-Man, or the neighborhood IT guy and stuff like that. And again, this sounds really bad, but at that time, I was like, I can't remember I was like late in my school years I can't remember exactly when I started Linux, but at that point, because that stepdad left, he found another girl in Norway because he worked there, and then he left. I was walking our dog, and another guy was walking his dog, and he was like probably in his late 30s or something like that, and we just started talking, that's what people do. And I was a little bit like, is he a creep? Or, like, what's going on here? But he was a cool guy, we just started talking and stuff like that. And he actually was, I think you would call it an IT manager or something like that. Like, he managed people for, like, big companies here in the town I live in. He managed IT departments. And he kind of took me under his wing. So I would help him, preparing computers that he will sell. I would help him fixing problems that he got home from work, or some of his old colleagues, because at one point he stopped. He was a little bit of an alcoholic. Like, he drank a lot, and he lost one of his jobs because he drank a little bit too much. It was not like he was passed out or anything. He must have had some demons that he was fighting with, of course, but he just came to work one too many times, a little bit tipsy, and they threw him out, basically. And in between that, some of his old what you will call it, customers, if you can call it that, or people he used to work for, they would still come to him with computer help and stuff like that, and he would teach me a lot of fucking stuff about Windows and computing and stuff like that. And then one day I was out the door, he was like, you have a vacation now, right? Yeah, I'm on holiday. And I think, like I said, it was the summer holidays. It was either the summer holidays or the winter holidays. Okay, one of those two things. And he's like, here, try and install this. And he gave me a book that you could buy in stores in the 90s. It was a book, like a paper leaf book or paperback book with Red Hat 4 point something on it. Back when Red Hat Linux was not Fedora. Or when Red Hat Linux was the only thing, there was not any Fedora around. And I was like, that sounds like a really good challenge. So I went home, I put it in, I booted it up, and I remember this as clear as day. The first thing that happens was, please assign your root device. And remember, I live in Denmark, and English is not my native language. The English we learn in school and uni is a little bit more technical, but it's not computer technical English. So I knew English, I could already back then speak fluent English, but I was like, what the fuck, root? Do you want me to go outside and dig up a tree and take the roots from the tree and say, here they are? But I was just massively confused. And I was looking it up in a dictionary. Yeah, roots, roots for plants and stuff like that. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I got so angry. He's like, he gave me something that didn't work. This is fucking weird. He's a fucking idiot. So I took it out of my machine. I fucked around with Windows a little bit more. And then it was like, it has to fucking, the manual has to have it some way. I can't be that, well, I am that stupid, but they can't be that fucking dumb that they don't at least help you. And lo and behold, I put it in, I booted it up, I came to the same, assigned the root partition, and I was like, okay, let me look at everything on the screen. And it did the / kind of thing. I'm like, huh? And then I looked at the manual. Oh, they correlate. Is it forward or /? I think it's /. That is root, I can't remember now. And I was looking, I was like, because I only had one drive. So it automatically found the drive. Just wanted me to say I wanted that as the root partition. So I'm just like, / next. That's it, next. And I got Linux installed, Red Hat Linux with GNOME. And I was like, this is the ugliest motherfucking thing I've ever seen. This is useless. Why do anyone wants to run this? Why do anyone puts it, even sell it on a fucking... Back then I thought that it was something you sold. You couldn't just get it for free. So I installed Windows again because it wiped out my computer. The day after, this is how fucking my brain worked back then. I was like, there must be a reason why he gave it to me. So I installed it again, and then I poked around with it. I was like, ooh, you can do all of these crazy things with it. Then I poked around, and of course I couldn't install anything. I didn't know how to get it on the internet. We had dial-up back then. And it was severely, or it was not dial-up, what is it called? ISDN or something like that. So it's between dial-up and cable. It was just faster dial-up, basically. And I didn't know how to get that to work. And I just fucked around with it for whatever time until I went to school and got proper internet, and then I researched the living shit out of it in the breaks between classes. Went to the library at school that had internet. I was just like Googling or searching. I think we were using. We had a Danish search engine called Ubi, I think it was called, or something like that. Or use Alta Vista. Some of those old search terms that you old folks will know about. And I was just researching the living shit out of Linux, and learned about like Torvalds, which is Stallman, Free Software Foundation, open source, and free software, and all of these things. And I was like, holy shit, there is so much to learn here. So I got hooked. I didn't get hooked because I was anti-proprietary or was fuck you Microsoft. People are bitching about Microsoft back then. They always bitch about Microsoft. I didn't mind Windows. Like I said, I made a lot of money on fucking around with Windows. Or at least when I needed money, I could get money from fucking around with Windows, helping people with Windows. So I didn't mind it. It was like, if I needed $20, I can get $20 like within a fucking hour, But this Linux thing was really fucking interesting, also because it cost no money. It was like the next best thing. Like, I'm a teenager, I have no fucking money. I can get, there's so many distributions. And I just went fucking head deep into Linux for like the last, like when I mean head deep, I mean like full-blown nerd mode for like 15 years in Linux. Every time I had time for it, I fucked around with Linux. From 2000 to 2008, that was my main operating system. And back then, making Linux was irritating. There were sites, it's still up, it's called Linux hardware, something like that. You had to go on there and see, if you want to buy a hardware, you have to see what worked and didn't work on the hardware, if it worked at all with Linux, and how good the driver support was. You can today, that people have it so easy with Linux today, like it runs on everything. You don't have to specifically pick specific hardware to get it to run. But back then, it was almost like building a computer, like you have to research what components fits with each other and how efficient they are with each other and stuff like that. You had to do that with Linux. I had a lot of motherboards, again, because I was fixing computers, people would just give me their old motherboard. And components, and I had motherboards where the sound card worked, but the network card didn't work. And then I had to put in a network card. There was always something that didn't work on a motherboard. And some motherboards, the CPU socket didn't work for some fucking weird reason. I had motherboards where the PCI lanes, ATP lanes didn't work, so I couldn't get graphic on it and stuff like that. Or I had motherboards where everything works besides the network and the sound card, so I had to plug in like Sound Blaster and external networks. And to me that was fun because, well, you actually learned about hardware. You had to know what firmware, because there was another thing. I had I think it was a motherboard, or was it an external network card, where one of the firmware version worked, a previous one, but the new one didn't because of some proprietary and corporate bullshit. They took away Linux support. So you had to flush the firmware on the hardware to get it to work on Linux. So you get a little bit like when I hear people say today that Linux teaches you about hardware, I'm like, you have no fucking idea. Sweet little innocent one, you have no idea. No, you don't have to sit and be like, fuck, I have to find a way to flush the fucking firmware on my graphic card, or my motherboard, or my external sound card to get it to work on Linux. You have no idea how Linux don't teach you anything about hardware. But I learned about the importance of capacitors on hardware. I learned about, firmware versions on hardware. I learned about, what south drift and north drift, which is all in the CPU nowadays. What all of these things, when you look at a hardware nowadays, I had to learn what that meant, what all of these bits and bobs, more, not all of them of course, but what the main components actually fucking meant. Because I have to see, is this chipset that's control this fucking thing on this PCB made by this company or that company? Because if it's made by the first company, it works on Linux. If it's made by the second company, it don't work on Linux. So you had to find it developed like controllers and all of these fucking things, and you have to find the serial number of those controllers or the serial number of the hardware itself to see what controllers it could be using. Like, well, there is like a 24% chance that it may or may not work depending on when it was built, because they migrated mid-production cycle over to this new supplier for the controller chip. Chip. And to me, that was super interesting because I actually fucking learned what was on the PCB. If you take one of these Arch Linux or Linux users, they say, oh, I learned about hardware, and you throw a fucking graphic card in their face or a network card in their face. Okay, explain what's on this fucking board. They're like, well, it's a graphic card. Yeah, a 5-year-old can say that, but you learned about hardware. What's on the board? That's knowing your hardware. What's on the fucking board? Why are the RAM module so close to the CPU? Why the fastest PCI card fastest to the fucking CPU? All of these things you learned by, I had to learn back then to run Linux. You don't learn that today. What you learn about your hardware is you learn to tell Linux, can you please tell me what hardware I have on my system? And Linux says, yes, good sir, I'm here to serve. You have X, Y, and C hardware, and then you're like, okay, then I have to use these drivers. Linux today teaches you how to probe your hardware, not how to deal with it. It teaches you nothing about what's on it. And to me, that was like so fucking interesting. And like I said, I just went full-blown fucking Linux on it. And then at 2008, I got my first iMac. And it was massively expensive. But I got a good job, and I was like, yeah. I paid it like in payments. Everything was cut into like 5 payments or something like that. And I loved that shit. So Linux got a little bit on the side burner. And then I got into gaming again. I used to game on like Commodores and Amigas and stuff. I had the first original PlayStation and the Xbox. And I got back into gaming again. And, well, Mac is not a good gaming system. So I installed Windows on it and gamed on the few games it could play. Then I built a gaming computer. I'm like, well, I have a gaming computer. I might as well just dual boot Linux. So I dual boot Linux on it again. So I got back into Linux after like 2 years off. Well, in those 2 years, I had a laptop that ran Linux. I always have Linux running on physical hardware at any form, either on a computer or laptop. So I always used Linux. I just didn't use it as much as previous years. And it's kind of where I am now. I'm still using it almost daily, but not as much as I did like 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Then I became really, really into Linux again. Because I was using Windows to game. I only booted into Windows to game. And then I started, I made gaming channel. And I only again used Windows for gaming and editing videos and then Linux for anything else. When my gaming computer shit its bad for some fuck, I can't remember what happened. I think the power supply busted out on or something like that. And I had a month, 2 months, I had to save up for a new computer. I had a laptop, I ran Linux for 2 months then. That was in the 2010s. And then I just basically got a little bit, I will not say jaded, well I got jaded, but that was because of the community. But I also was like, this Linux is not moving anywhere. Like on the corporate side, it's like fucking innovating all the time. It's doing a lot of crazy shit. It's doing all of these amazing shit. But on the desktop side, it just stopped being relevant. It stopped innovating. Because back in the day, Linux was what people called, if you want to the R&D OS of the world. So they were like, if you want to see what is going to be implemented into Windows and macOS in the future, look at what Linux is doing. Linux had a lot of things Mac and Windows did not have, that Mac and Windows copied from Linux. Fast forward to like the mid-2010s, it's the reverse thing. Nobody gives a fuck about Linux desktop anymore, so when Linux desktops are doing anything, they're copying from Windows and macOS. Hate it or not, macOS and Windows comes out with a feature, then GNOME or KDE copy it, or some other desktop environment. It's rare that you see Linux be the forefront of multiple desktops. They were like one of the first ones doing that. Spinning cubes and all those like fancy fucking Windows animation. Linux was the first one to really, really do that like on a mass scale. Nowadays, Linux is like, yes, we get updates to the desktop environments, we get updates to some desktop technologies, but ever since like 2015, 14, Linux just stood still on the desktop. Not on the corporate side, but on the desktop. It's just the same shit, but just a little bit better. And yes, we got gaming support, but not everyone is a gamer, And console gaming is way outnumbering PC gaming anyway. So it's like, yeah, if you're a PC gamer, you can game on Linux, but you can't do your photoshopping. Well, you can't use Photoshop and all these other things. I know there's ways of doing it, but you can't officially use Photoshop. It was just like every time I had to use Linux, I had to compromise on a lot of other things that I didn't feel like I want to compromise on anymore. And I also got this feeling that or I realized that I was working for my computer when I was running Linux. And this is even the most user-friendly Linux distribution. You're still somewhat working for it because you have to okay, there's just so much software that don't work that Windows users use at your job, that you then have to find alternatives for, you have to learn those, then you have to find ways of working with those alternatives in the current workflow that all your employees are doing or co-workers are doing and blah blah blah. So when they're going home and having fun and getting drunk and fucking the boyfriend or girlfriend, you're sitting and testing fucking one free open source program that's been maintained the last 10 years because it should fix a problem with compatibility issues between the FOSS version of a software and the corporate world software or the proprietary software version of a software that the rest of the world uses. So I was just I'm making things harder for myself on purpose. I am making things harder for myself. And I'm not really learning much, because all I'm doing is I'm just sitting there and trying different softwares out until I find the one that is the least hassle, or that has the most compatibility. But I'm actually, if I want to do one thing, and my job requires me to do one thing, I'm doing a separate thing, but I'm trying to be compatible with what they want me to do. So I'm working twice as hard, doing twice as much fucking shit, trying to do what they are doing. So it's why the fuck do I just not use Windows then? Because anything I do professionally requires me to use Windows. And yes, you could use it in a virtual machine, but again, now you're making things more difficult. So if everything that I need to do is Windows-centric, well, then that has to be my main system, apparently. And then Linux can be run in virtual machines. Because there's nothing in my life that requires me to run Linux. That was when I came to that, in 2018, I came to that conclusion that there are things in my life I just cannot do on Linux. I can do it on macOS and Windows, but I cannot do it on Linux that my personal life, either professionally or non-professionally, requires me to do. So why the fuck am I sitting here spending hours and hours and hours yelling and screaming at a second-grade FOSS software that only do it half-assed and it takes 10 times longer because it either crashes all the time or I have to use 2 programs to get the same end results where I can do everything problem-free on Windows. And I know I'm not the only one having that problem, but I'm also not the only one. My problem is not everyone else's problem. There's people that can definitely live on Linux with no fucking hassles whatsoever. I just can't. It's the way that I live my life, the people I talk to, the things that I do, the jobs that I have, requires me to use Windows. And to get the best experience, it requires me to run natively Windows. And again, you say, I'll just have more computers and laptops. Yeah, why the fuck should I spend thousands of dollars just so I can say, well, I have a Linux machine? It's just it's a waste of fucking money. More e-waste in the end anyway. So I was you know what? Anything I want, anything I have to do, that's necessary for me, has to be, or not anything, but a lot of it has to be on Windows. And it requires it to be on bare metal. Everything that I'm doing on Linux, besides maybe 1 or 2 things, do not require Linux to be on bare metal. I could do that in a virtual machine. So then it makes sense to be, well, if my Windows world requires me to run bare metal, not my Linux world, well, then Windows becomes the host and Linux becomes, in a virtual machine. So I did that for many, many, many years. Almost all the videos you see on this channel with Linux on it is run in a virtual machine. Never on bare metal. Every video you see on this channel that has Linux on it, I think besides 2 or 3, are all recorded from VirtualBox or VMware, where Linux is run in a virtual machine. Even on my live streams, I boot up VirtualBox and have Linux running in there. Nowadays, I'm running Mac, also because, again, I don't like Windows. A lot of people think I'm this Windows. I don't like Windows. I'm not a Windows fan. I hate Windows. But I'm also a realistic person that understand that sometimes what you have to do may not be what you want to do. I wish I didn't have to run Linux or Windows, but I have to for work and stuff like that. So I'm doing it. That's being a fucking adult. Sometimes you do things you don't particularly like doing, but you have to because it pays the bills and etc, etc, etc. And that's kind of where my life is today, that Linux has become this, I boot it up when I want to have a little bit fun or when I'm doing live streams or videos for this channel sometimes. But mostly it's Mac or Windows that I'm fucking around with. Windows for development and support and infrastructure stuff like that at work. a little bit at home, but at home it's mostly Mac or Linux in a virtual machine. Sometimes I boot up Windows for the odd game here and there, but nowadays I game mostly on my PlayStation because I barely game anymore. When I'm not fucking around with either Mac OS or Windows, I'm developing, I'm building programs. I'd rather sit 2 hours developing than playing PlayStation, because those 2 hours development makes me a better developer, means I can make more money, etc., etc., etc. So that's where the whole Linux kind of thing went, like my Linux journey went. And that's the technical side of it. Now it's the thing that you don't like is going to come, like you really don't like. Because now we're going to talk about the community side of it. And that is that in the beginning, like I said, I didn't really have access to that much internet, so I was not on a lot of forums and stuff like that, but the few forums I was on, it was okay, there's nothing really happened, People were nice-ish, they were not more obnoxious than anyone else was obnoxious on the internet back then. In the late 2000s, when I had, at that time I had internet, like I was moved out from home, I had internet on my own and stuff like that. And the more that I looked into this Free Software Foundation thing, the more I started to despise it, and the more it looked like a cult, the more it looked like a political party, the more it looked like they wanted to tell the world how to live, instead of just having people do whatever they want. They basically want to be dictators. All of those things I don't agree with or don't like. I'm more for individual freedom and stuff like that. I believe people should be able to do whatever the fuck they want as long as they're not hurting anyone doing anything illegal. The Free Software Foundation wants the world to do what they tell them the world to do. What they allow the world to do. And I see that as a dictatorship. Or at least like a semi-dictatorship, or a cult-like, or cult-ish thing. And then when this whole YouTube started to come around, I also started to watch a lot of YouTube content creators. And this started out being tutorials, help, a little bit of Microsoft bashing here, a little bit of Microsoft bashing here. But a lot of like, let's see if we can get Ubuntu to run on this system. Let's see if we get this distribution on that system. Let's see what's new with this distribution updates. And you get the idea here. And then when we came closer to like the 2015s, it just started to become more and more drama. From 10 to 15, it was a mixed bag, but from 15 up to now, go look at most of your Linux content creators. How much of it is actually fucking educational, technical content? Almost none of it is. It's all yelling, screaming, bitching, and moaning about how the rest of the world is bad and blah, 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 and I'm bad for running Windows and proprietary software. You are bad for running Windows and proprietary software. You are bad, everyone is bad. Because they're not running the fucking penguin cock and stuff like that. I don't fucking want to deal with that. I don't want to do that. And then I noticed when people started to go, and myself, when we started to go into forums, social media, people are just obnoxious. Like the community was just obnoxious. And it just become worse and worse and worse and worse. And then when I debated for like decades to make this channel, over a decade, and then when I started making it, what's going on here? I had a gaming channel for, at that time, when I started this one, the gaming channel was like 7 or 8 years old. In 6 months, I banned like 4 times more people on this channel than I did on my gaming channel. And back then, when I started this channel, I did what every fucking Linux YouTuber did. Distribution reviews, software reviews, how-tos. There was not much like what I do now, yelling and screaming, bitching and moaning. And reaction was just like stock standard fucking Linux content. But they just went nuts at each other in the comment section. Or someone came in and said, yeah, Linux this and that, but yeah, I still like Windows. And they were like fucking castrating them and nipple twisting them and horseshoeing them up the fucking wazoo. And you thought it was the devil coming down, up, not down, but up from the depth of hell to try and take over the world. It was just mental. And I'm just like, how the fuck do anyone wants to be part of this? How do anyone wants to be part of this? So that just reinforced the thing where I was like, yeah, Linux is just going to be my hobby OS. It's just going to be this little unique thing that I play with when I'm bored. Because the system don't really innovate anymore. Nobody gives a fuck about Linux desktop. And I mean nobody gives a fuck. The people that actually are the ones that make sure that hardware works, that help developers build for Linux and stuff, that they don't care about Linux desktop. It's all about the corporate world. Like Ubuntu, if you're old enough, can remember that Ubuntu used to be a desktop-only distribution. It was the first corporate desktop-focused computing, Linux distribution. They had like OneDrive, they had their own version of that. Photos, Android photos and iPhones, they had their own version of that. They had fucking Ubuntu running on television screens and stuff like that. They wanted to make Ubuntu run on mobile phones. We still have that today with, like, is it Ubuntu Portal, what the fuck it's called? They did Unity because they wanted Ubuntu to be more desktop streamlined, but they couldn't make money. Like, they lost money every year. They had to, cater to where Linux was strongest, and that's in the corporate world. And ever since that happened, on the technical side, they stopped giving a fuck about Linux on the desktop, besides a few odd little distributions here that do make some great little tools, but they really don't make any impact. They don't have the money or the power to go and say to X, Y, and Z company, can you please support us and we will help you support us. I hope it will happen, but I doubt it. And then you on top of that, you have this like obnoxious fucking community that just, since 2014 or something like that, just went from being actually people that knew about technology, that actually know what the fuck they're talking about. It has now become a shit ton of whiny crybabies that think they know what they're talking about, that think that they are geniuses when it comes to Linux, and they don't even know how to fucking attach a hard drive to a system if they don't have hot plugging anymore. If they can't use gparted. They barely can use the command line to fucking do it via parted in the command line. They definitely can't do it via, like, the editing, the text files to do it. I'm not going to tell you which one it is, because you should know that. There are like two main ones where you do it in. And they sit and yell and scream at all these, like, other people in the world, and yell and scream at Windows users for being stupid and know nothing about computers. Then you hear them talk about computers and they know less than Windows users do. Not only has Linux as a whole moved focus, all the main players in Linux, SUSE, Red Hat, Canonical, moved away from focusing on the desktop. The community went away from being an opinionated technical group of people to become cry babies, whine babies, entitled, obnoxious disciples of a cult. It just, like, who wants to be part of that? That's kind of why Linux is where it is today. I used to say back in the day, the biggest thing that held Linux back was, lack of hardware support, vendor support, software support, all of these things. I honestly believe that the thing that holds Linux back today, like, we only like 4-ish% of the total market share, the community, the license, the TPL license that a lot of people use, and the massive fragmentation in the Linux world. I'm not talking so much about distributions, but software. This is another thing that I started to see, that the more Linux became popular, the more you saw GIMP in 10,000 different fucking versions, because someone didn't like one thing GIMP did. It could be a placement of a button, it could be a theme, it could be one feature that they didn't implement. So instead of making it work with GIMP and go to the GIMP people and work with them to get it into the main build, they just forked GIMP, or something like that. I used to call Linux the fork world, because everyone forked everything. Distributions forked each other. Everyone forked each other. Every time there was just like a slight little dispute, fork. That's like the answer to anything in the Linux world. It's like, we don't agree, let's fork it, instead of finding common ground. So that means that you have like hundreds of great developers not talking to each other, because FOSS projects really don't talk to each other. So you have hundreds of developers trying to fix the same problem, but no talk with each other. And they're trying to fix it in different ways. So you have this, I call it parallel programming, where people are doing the same shit in parallel instead of using each other's code. So you're wasting probably 50-80% of development time. Because we don't like them over there. They called it something weird, or they didn't want to implement our thingy, and therefore we can't use their code. We don't want to talk to them, and blah, 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 blah. Where if people just fucking, could manage to work together, Linux would have been 10 times what it is today. Yes, we will not have so many forks, but we have so much better hardware, or software, sorry. Because it's better for 100 people to try and fix one problem than 10 people trying to fix the same problem with 10 different fucking forks within 10 fucking different forks. Because one may fix it, but it don't work on the other 9s. And now they have to spend as much time to get it to work properly because they did something. They used a different class, a different programming language, or whatever the fuck it is. Or they built the class structure differently and blah, 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 and that have repercussions down the line. And yeah, the community, the license and forking, like the fragmentation, is definitely what's holding Linux back. And also, like the fourth one to some degree, lack of vision. We have all of these different distributions that all have great visions individually. Some don't, but a lot of them have a really good mission statement, a vision, what they want to do with that distribution. They just never do it. or they either fall flat or nobody wants to support them. So you have all of these, like, again, fragmented communities around one distribution that have a really good mission statement, and they never get anywhere. Where back in the day, we had a little bit more unity. I used to say this, back in the day, a Windows user could come into a Linux forum. He will get made fun of, and so on, but he was still welcomed. And the day that he tried out Linux, they will be the happiest people on earth. Even if you do boot it with Windows. Because a lot of people do boot it with Windows back then. You could have people coming in supporting one distribution, debating people that support another distribution or software. But in the end, they were all still just best friends because they were all using Linux. They were just best friends that argued a little bit or had a different of opinion. Nowadays, if you're using Ubuntu, you are the devil. You shall not be allowed in our circles. If you're using this distribution or this distribution, we cannot talk to each other. There's never been a more dividedness in the Linux world than there is today. And it just keeps getting more and more divided. And Mac don't have that problem. FreeBSD don't have that problem. Haiku don't have that problem. Windows don't have that problem. Only Linux has. I will debate that the Linux community is in a worse place the last 10 years than it was in the 90s and 2000s. The Linux distribution world is in a worse place than it was 2010 and down. Yes, it can do more stuff, it has more support, but it's also never been more fragmented. It also has never been more combative. It never has been more tribalistic. Yes, we can do more shit on Linux, but the FOSS developers, the open source developers, talk even less with each other today than they did back in the day. And it just keeps, it keeps getting more and more tribalism. Again, it's become more and more political. It keeps coming more and more like, well, if you're running Linux, you basically have to be like a low-key Marxist, communist, socialist that hates the corporate world, that hates capitalism. And that's bullshit. It's a fucking operating system. It's a system you use to interact with your hardware. That's all it fucking is. And that was how people looked at it back in the day. There would be people, of course, there's always like, people that look at the world in different ways. There were people that were highly political back then also, but they were not obnoxious about it. But now you have like an 18-year-old that think they know everything about computing. They can't even fucking turn it on almost, or can't even set up dual booting with Windows and Linux. Can't even fucking edit in most of the config files that actually matter if it's not like the desktop environment. Anything below the desktop environment, they're like peeing themselves and fucking frightened because they have no idea what they're doing, and if they fuck it up, they will fry the whole system. I keep saying this a lot, that when I help people with problems on Linux, it's self-induced problems. It's people that fuck around with things they don't know, but they think they do. And that's great if they're doing it for learning, but they're doing it on production machines. They're doing it on their main systems. So they're not doing it for learning. They're doing it because they think they know what they're doing. And, Mac users, it's the same. Windows users, it's the same fucking bullshit. Most tech support is people's self-induced fucking problems. So Linux as a whole, from the community to the technology, is in a worse place than it ever has been. Yes, we have more users than we had in the early 2000s, but it's still in a worse place. We can run games now. It's still in a worse place. And I hope you understand what I say when I say worse place. Never been more divided. Never been more fucking toxic. No innovation is really going on anymore. And it's all just people copium huffing and puffing over the year of the Linux desktop. I was around before that was a thing. And ever since it started, it has been a joke. The year of the Linux desktop is a joke that became a reality for some people, that now have become a religion for some people, that they are pursuing that year of the Linux desktop. as a fucking, like, milestone of that we took over the world. It started out as a fucking joke. It was not meant to be taken seriously. It was meant as like, oh, let's see what year Linux takes over Microsoft as a market share. Because that was the prediction that they thought Linux would have on the desktop. And it looked like it for a little while. Now they are like fucking huffing copium about that every year's Linux desktop, because then they have like 10,000 small excuses that basically are bullshit. But in their mind, it makes it the year of the Linux desktop. The only thing that makes it the year of the Linux desktop is the day that Linux desktop, let's say, at least beats macOS. Like both macOS X and macOS, because they are now two separate things. So when Linux can beat those two combined on market share, yeah, you can say the year of the Linux desktop. Until then, you're just a fucking heroin addict, bullshitting everyone into belief that you're not a heroin addict, basically. See you all later. Bye-bye.